welcome to The Art of Being Human. On the last segment, I talked about the moderately retarded person and what they can do and what they can't do and what it's like to teach them. I found it very productive teaching them. I found it very satisfying teaching them, and I really grew to like them a whole lot. They have personalities, you know, you have those that are easier to handle than others, and you have, they get to like you as well, and so you kind of form a bond with them. It's not hard to get to like people that are different than yourselves. You just have to realize that they have equal worth and they do the best that they can, and what else can you expect from them anyway? Well, I want to go into the characteristics of the mildly retarded, and then we're going to switch and we're going to do some work with the people who are on the other end of the spectrum, genius level or very intelligent people. So the characteristics of the mildly retarded, we are talking about 50 to 70 IQ here. Now, 70 is on borderline of average, not really, but kind of. So therefore, you're actually getting to people who are, in many respects, pretty normal. They do have a mental age of about 3 to 7 years, so they can learn more. They can learn to the level of about 4th grade. Excuse me. That means they can read, they can write some, they can talk more, they have more of an understanding of things. They can learn pretty much to be self-supportive. Now they're going to need to have some supervision, but they're going to be able to be a lot more independent than those who are moderately retarded are. They can do cleaning, they can help in farms, there are various things they can do, but they not be able to understand legal obligations. So when you make a promise or write a contract or sign a contract, you're legally obligated to fulfill that. They're not going to have that kind of an IQ, but they are going to be able to master everyday things and everyday living a lot better than those who are not as bright as they are, meaning the moderately and severely retarded. So if you can, they're like the next step up, you might say. And you can have good relationships with them. You can be with them and you can help them and you can teach them. They're much more teachable. Now I want to go into superior intelligence. They show great intellectual ability as children, and you're going to notice it right away. A lot of these children that are very bright, they do things much earlier than you would expect. They might be walking at 10 months old, and so you wonder how precocious they're going to be, because most children, 15 months is still considered to be the average age for walking. These kids are walking at 10 months old. They seem to be developing faster than you would expect them to develop as babies. And so that's a cue in, because sometimes if you have great intelligence, then everything develops fast. They are walking sooner, they're walking faster, they're saying a lot more, a lot earlier, and it's like the whole body is primed for very rapid growth, physical growth, intellectual growth, and so therefore you're going to notice they're doing things earlier and earlier than you would expect them to do. I had one of my nieces that was walking at 10 months. I said, that's awfully early. Well, she's also talking, she's also got wonderful balance. She seems to be able to reason things out. She's brilliant, you know. And one of my great nephews has started walking, and he's a little over 8 months old, and he's walking. That's very unusual. It's very precocious. If the body is being precocious and developing rapidly, it may be that the mind is also developing rapidly, and you're going to see them do things that you would not expect a child to be able to do at their young age. Now, I want to read off to you a letter from a 4-year-old. This is just 4 years old. And this is what she says about herself. I am 4 years old. I can read any English book. I can say all the Latin substantives and adjectives and active verbs besides 52 lines of Latin poetry. I can cast up any sum in addition and can multiply by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. His IQ or her IQ, 200. And you can see what 2-year-old says things like that, or what 4-year-old says things like that. I was actually watching a television show, and there's a child on that was 2 years old. I could not believe the way that she talked like an adult. She was on a plane, and she was complaining that everybody wanted to talk to her. Well, she talked just like an adult. She says, why don't people leave me alone? These are her words. I'm not exact, but pretty close to what she actually said for the camera. Why don't people leave me alone? They just always want to talk to me, and frankly, I don't get it. I don't understand adults anyway. How would I? I'm only 2. And she was 2 years old. She understood what that meant. And she says, but they're always at me to do this and to do that, and they want to talk to me, and I really want to rest. I'm on this airplane. I would like to take a nap. I would like to get some rest, and nobody will let me do it because they're always talking to me like I'm an adult. Well, I'm not an adult. I'm 2. But you see, she talked just like an adult, just like an adult. So I don't know what her IQ is, but I'm going to say possibly 200 range easily, because she's talking way, way above what a 2-year-old. How does a 2-year-old talk? Well, usually not much. They're learning to say things like dada and doggy and cat, mama, things like that. Just very, very simple one word. And they don't get to 2 words or 3 words or a sentence until they're 4 years old or so. And here, a child that's 2 years old is just learning syllables, just learning how to talk. And they're just developing physical skills like walking. The walking is better, and being able to climb on chairs and things like that. That's 2-year-old level, not this child. This child was way, way superior than that. So you see, intelligence, there's such a variety. It can go in either way. Now, about 10% in 1,000 children have IQs of 140 and above. There's a question as to where genius begins. I would say 140 is very, very superior. Most people don't come even close to 140. Most people, the average is going to be 90 to 110, and that's where most people are, and that's okay. Average people, that's what most of us are anyway. But when you get to 140, there are a lot of things that you can think of and do that other people with less IQ can't. So I'd say 1 in many thousands has an IQ of 160 or above, and I would say when you get an IQ of 160, it is so superior that you're really thinking in terms of genius level. I would consider that to be genius level. The definitions of what can be done at 160 IQ, they have a capacity to learn that's unbelievable. They have ability of very high levels of what they can achieve. Their aptitude, their abilities in certain areas, that's sky high, and they have a tremendous amount of knowledge and a tremendous amount of achievement. They are not average people. They go way above average people. And yet average people, given enough time, can accomplish some of the same things that anyone with 140 IQ can do, but that's still very, very superior. 160, I'm going to say 160 approaching genius level. That's what I think. That's my own interpretation. Now, these are the different types of intelligence that you have. Some people are really good at math, some people are really good at arts, and so there's a lot of different ranges and a lot of different abilities that you have. Some people who can do math can't do reading. I had one of my friends, he graduated with us, he was one of our classmates, and he was doing mathematics at Boston University and UMass, all of these colleges, and he was like in the 8th grade. I mean, he was way superior to the rest of us, but he was a very nice boy. There were no acts of, see how good I am, or this kind of thing. He was just a very humble, very nice kid. But he could do things that were unbelievable. And when it got to working with mathematics, he was doing college classes, and people were taking him to these various universities where he's studying mathematics because he was so far above. Even the students in the colleges, he was far above them. To stick him in an 8th grade math class when he could do college work, superior college work, that would be ridiculous. So part of the time he spent with us as we were learning, and the rest of the time he spent at various universities and colleges who all wanted him because he was so bright. He made a formula when we graduated from the 8th grade. He made a formula for every student in our class that he decided depicted the kind of people that we were. I don't know how he ever did it, but he did it. And so he was very, very brilliant. And I still see him from time to time. And he's just as brilliant, but he's just as humble. He's just as nice as he ever was. There was no air of superiority, but he is a brilliant person. So these are the various types of intelligence that people have. And even very, very bright people don't always have them all. Now, verbal comprehension is one type of intelligence where you have and that you can understand the use of words. Well, we all do, but there are some people that are a lot better at it than others. Then there's word fluency, being able to speak words, being able to talk in a fluent kind of manner. And most of us do that fairly well. Some people do a lot better than others. Then there's number ability, the ability to use numbers, the ability to do mathematics. And some people are really, really great at that, others not so much. There's a space kind of intelligence. Now, what does that mean? Dealing with dimensions, being able to draw designs for memory. There is a case on record, I'm familiar with it, where there was an architect. Architects usually draw very well. They're very precise. They know an inch is equal to how many feet and so forth, and they can make all these drawings about the kinds of buildings that they're working on, buildings that they want to see built, and a lot of the drawings are very beautiful because they're very, very specific, they're very detailed, and they give you a really totally accurate picture as to what a building is going to look like when it's finished. Well, there was this one architect, a female architect. She was very good at what she did, but she couldn't draw. She had a learning disability in which she could not reproduce what she could see in her mind and what she wanted to be put down on paper. And yet she was a brilliant architect, but that was a learning disability that she had. So what she had to do was she hired somebody who was an artist. She would describe to him what she wanted, and he would draw it. And when he got it right, she would say, yeah, that's exactly what I want. And they did that step by step. So her drawings weren't really her drawings. They were somebody else's, but they were what she needed for her career as an architect. And she was a successful architect, but she had to have an artist on hand to draw the things that most architects do by themselves, because she had that learning disability. So, I mean, I have to remind you that a learning disability has nothing to do with your IQ. It means you can't do something, but it doesn't mean that the rest of your IQ is at fault, because there are a lot of people who have a learning disability, but everything else they do perfectly well. So it's not an indicator of a low IQ if you have a learning disability. It just means you have difficulty in whatever area your learning disability is in. So you need to remember that. But dealing with space is you have to deal with dimensions. You have to draw what's on your mind. Now, there are different types of learning disabilities too. I worked with a person once who, if you close your eyes and I say the word tree, you'll have an image of a tree in your mind. Or if I ask you to close your eyes and I say plant, you'll have a different kind of plant. Each person will probably visualize it differently. They may not be able to describe it, but they can see plants in their mind as soon as I mention the word and they close their eyes. I had one person I worked with that couldn't do that. I mean, I could say, look at this chair. Yeah, I see the chair. Close your eyes and imagine a chair. Can't see anything. I can't see chair, I can't see anything. One of the aspects of intelligence, and there was nothing wrong with his IQ, but one of the aspects of intelligence is to be able to conjure up in your mind and be able to see things in your mind. Say, I want to go and I want to buy a pink dress. Well, I can visualize in my mind what I want in that pink dress. I can visualize the fact that it's pink. I can visualize the fact that it has a certain sleeves on it, or I can visualize how lengthy the skirt is, or if it's a full skirt, or if it's not a full skirt. I can do all of that in my head without even thinking much about it. He could do nothing. Once he closed his eyes and it was dark, he could not imagine anything. So that was a learning disability that he had. He would never be able to see anything that anyone talked about when they talked about something unless he could see it and say, oh yeah, that's it. If he closed his eyes, it was like it was all gone. I've never seen a person like that since that time, but it is what part of our being human, I guess, is having our own personal learning disabilities. Now, memory. Can you remember things? Can you recall things? Some people have a good memory, they can remember everything, but some people don't. Then perceptual speed, what that means is how fast does it take for you to grasp details? If somebody's describing something to do, how fast can you grasp that? How fast does it take to make an impression on your mind? And most people can do it fairly easily, some people not so much. That's perceptual speed. And reasoning. How can you find something that will help you to solve a problem? Find a principle that will help you to solve a problem. If I have a problem to solve and I'm searching around, how long will it take for me to say, oh, this is it, this is the problem, and this is how I'm going to solve that problem? It doesn't have to be a personal problem, just something that you deal with. Now, I know my father did a lot of work in engineering. He was not an engineer, but he was so bright that engineers used to come to him to have him help them solve problems that they couldn't solve, and he did it every time using mathematics, and it wasn't even a problem to him. But he could say, well, here's my machine, and I want it to produce paper. He worked on paper-making machines that would produce paper. And I want the paper to be of this consistency and this and that and the other. And he'd say, oh, that's simple. All I have to do is blah, blah, blah. And he would go down and he would arrange his machine. And this is what the principles I'm using to get what I want. Some people can't do that. That takes a certain amount of IQ. It takes a certain amount of intelligence. And some people can do it and some people can't. So we have, and I just want to run over this again, verbal comprehension, understanding of words, word fluency, being able to speak well, numbers, being able to work with numbers in mathematics, space, dealing with dimensions, and being able to draw designs for memory. Memory has to do with recall. Can you remember things that have gone on? Perceptual speed, grasping visual details, and reasoning, finding a principle to solve problems with. These are all the various types of things that happen in the intelligence realm. So you might, if you want to put this all together, say that these are the types of intelligence that exist. There's mechanical intelligence, there's motor dexterity, there's artistic aptitude, and there's mathematical. It's very hard. When you get an IQ test, I used to give them, when you get the IQ test, you test all of these various areas in the IQ test, and then you get it all together, you do whatever mathematical thing you have to do, and you come out with some kind of an IQ number. Usually the IQ number is going to run from very low, which would be 15 to 20, up to like 200, 250, with most people running 90 to 110, very, very normal. Then we went over the bell-shaped curve and what that means. There are other ways of designing intelligence tests, though. There are tests which depend, which are stanines. They call them stanines. The higher you are, the better you are. And there's no such thing as a bell-shaped curve. It's the case of your 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and they get percentiles. Like a person who is 95th percentile on something is a person who is very, very bright, because 100% would be the brightest. You can't go beyond 100%. And so there are different ways of designing intelligence tests to measure all of this. I find it fascinating. I've taken these tests. I've given these tests. And so I find it's very interesting. And people say, oh, you can't depend upon IQ tests. They're always wrong. Well, an IQ test may not always be right, but usually it's right enough to let you make some assumptions that are very accurate about what a person's intelligence will be. Now, we have to take into effect the fact that some people had a bad day and they're not doing so well because they've had a bad day. But you don't rely on just one test. You rely on several tests, and you put them all together. And if you're a diagnostician that knows what you're doing, if something seems off, you retest and you find out if it's off. Is the person not feeling well? Did they have a bad day? Was it some personal circumstance that they were dealing with that was difficult for them, so therefore they weren't thinking so clear? And there are ways of checking tests against tests. Now, it gets to be complicated, it really does, but I find it fascinating. And here's where statistics helps us, because we can take groups of people and we can put them in certain categories, and then we can check all of that out with statistics. How normal is this? How legitimate is this? So it's not like you take one test and you're forever branded by that one test. You're not, because there's always retesting and checking and evaluating, and anyone who's taking a personality test knows that there's going to be different days when the person does a whole different kind of thing, and they work as better or worse or whatever. So you just have to know how to handle the test. You have to be able to understand what these tests do and how do you evaluate the test. They have to be valid and they have to be reliable. To be a reliable test means that if you give the test more than once, that they're going to get a similar result. It's probably never going to be the same result because there's so many individual factors that come into play. But if you give a test and you give it 10 times to the same group of people and it comes out about the same, then it's probably a reliable test. It's testing what it is supposed to test, and the test results will be reliable. They may not be accurate to the point, but they're going to be pretty reliable. A valid test means it's testing what it is supposed to test. There are some tests, when they do a lot of research, they don't put a test out in the market until it's been researched very thoroughly. And if a test is valid, it's testing what it is supposed to test, not something else. You know, it is possible to test something else and not understand that you're doing it until you research it out, and then you find out that you're testing something different than what you thought you were testing. Sometimes, you're testing the culture. Can some people who can't speak English very well take these tests, and maybe not? You have to have a test especially designed to test what it is that you want tested. And you have to take everything into consideration. The person's style of living, whether they're an immigrant, whether they know the English language very well, or whether they're just learning the English language because they've just become a citizen. And all of these things make a big difference. What about the culture that the person is living in? Do they accept the fact that testing is valid, or are they so afraid of it, they're afraid they're going to be earmarked as something that they may not be? Then you see it's a problem to them, so they don't even try to do the test well. You have tests that are given and they have to be interpreted. Personality tests have to be interpreted. Aptitude and tests for ability, they're all different tests. They have to be interpreted as to whether they're reliable and whether they're valid. And if they are both, then the test is ready to go to market after a considerable amount of research. And you can find a lot about a person by a test, but you're not going to judge them. It's just another tool to understand them better. Now I'm going to close it here, and we'll continue with this next week. Please join me then.